It's that time of year again. Everything is catching up to me, and the first thing that goes out the window is my sleep routine. In this video, I'm going to share with you the reset routine I use when my sleep schedule is non-existent or just not fitting with how I'm living life right now. I will say that this routine can be followed any time of year, but just with the holiday season right now and things being so busy, it's very easy for a lot of people to lose hold of their typical sleep routine. The new year is coming up, so let's get our sleep back on track. By the way, if you're new here, well, so am I. This is the first video on this channel all about sleep and rest, so definitely subscribe if you want to see more content like this. With that, let's get into the reset. The first part of my routine is finding your baseline. What I mean by that is getting a good idea of what your sleep looks like right now. Of course, you could have a sleep tracker, some fancy wearable to help you get a sleep score, track your hours of rest. I don't have that, and it's definitely not necessary for this step of the routine. Here's what I like to do. For at least 1 week, I like to pay more attention to how I'm sleeping, not only how many hours I'm sleeping throughout the night, but what time I go to bed, what time I actually get ready for bed, when I'm starting to feel sleepy. Now, you don't have to go into all of that detail. I will say sometimes the more the better, especially if it's the first time you're going through this process, but at least getting some sense of what your sleep looks like right now, and not just for a day, but for at least a week. For me, I've been going through this process for the last 2 weeks, just paying a lot of attention to how I'm actually spending my time as I'm getting ready for bed, and how many hours of opportunity I'm giving myself to sleep overnight before I have to start my morning. Again, this first step is all about finding your baseline. So in whatever way makes the most sense for you, just starting to track some of that information about where you're starting from before you go through the rest of this reset routine. The second part of my sleep reset routine is finding your wind down window. When I say wind down window, I'm talking about the time in between the doing part of your day and actually falling asleep. Now, I know for some people with busy schedules, this window may be very short or almost non-existent, but again, what we're starting with is first paying attention to what that transition looks like. Ideally, this wind down window is a time for you to transition to a slower pace, to start getting into a more restful state so that you and your body are ready to get a good night's sleep. Some questions I like to ask myself during this part of the reset routine include, when am I doing my last real tasks for the day? For me, the one task that really comes to mind is setting my alarm for the next morning and having a plan for how I want to use that time. For my job, I often have to get up quite early, so when I'm at the end of the doing part of my day, I make sure to check my calendar for what I have in the morning, how early I need to be up, and I factor that in as I'm setting my alarms and thinking about how I need to start the next day. Another question I like to ask myself in this step, after getting those last tasks of the day out of the way, what do you do next? For me, I like to start by getting ready for bed, brushing my teeth, showering, all of that stuff. I think it's helpful to have an understanding of how long it takes you to get ready for bed, just so you can factor that in to your nightly process. I can then transition into more relaxing activity, such as my go-to right now, which is listening to audiobooks. I will say this is not for everyone, but what I've found really helps me right now is listening to audiobooks at less than 1 speed. People tend to actually speed up videos, podcasts, audiobooks in order to learn faster, get more content, keep your mind engaged. However, I found when I'm trying to get ready for bed, it actually helps me slow down by slowing down the content that I'm listening to. So I will slow down to 0.9, 0.8 speed on my audiobook, and that really helps me get into a quieter mood. I would also recommend asking yourself what your go-to relaxing activities are, especially at night. Now, I know for a lot of us that can include screen time, and while that's not ideal, it's okay. I will say, especially in the last hour before going to bed, it's good to reduce or, if possible, eliminate that screen time, but easier said than done. If it helps, start by listing all the activities that you typically do before bed. I start by listing out the activities that I find myself doing and then going through that list and identifying which I would like to be doing more of, and if needed, which ones I need to be doing less of. Change can be hard, especially for your go-to activities. So instead of looking at going all in on one activity or completely cutting others out, I think just asking yourself what you want to be doing more of and what you want to be doing less of can be very helpful as you're doing this reset, and just keep those in mind as you go through your next week or so. I found one of the most challenging parts of my wind down routine is finding a process that actually sticks. Starting new habits and sticking to them can sometimes be really challenging, and sleep habits, more than anything, I have a really hard time sticking to. Over the past couple of years, I've worked on finding a process that helps me start to implement new sleep routines and actually stick to them. If that's something that interests you, let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy to make another video about that because I think it's a whole nother topic that we could deep dive into. The third part of my sleep reset routine is my sleep space audit. And when I say sleep space, I'm talking about both mental space and physical space. Starting with mental space, it's important to note that you want to have more clear mental space as you're getting ready to go to sleep. But again, easier said than done. For me, two methods I found to help clear the mental space before bed. First, thinking about your time tomorrow and scheduling in some time to take care of some of the tasks taking up your mind. I often have a lot of to-do items that I'm thinking about before bed or planning for tomorrow. So I know this is not the best practice, but what I typically do right now is pull out my Google Calendar and just block off an hour or set some reminders for the next day so that those tasks are in my phone. I won't forget about them, but I can forget about them for the night. I know I won't forget about them tomorrow because I'll have a reminder already set. My second method, which I'm trying to get more in the habit of, is pulling out a notebook or a piece of paper and creating a list of all of those thoughts of the to-dos and everything else that are floating around in my head as I'm trying to get ready for bed. Now, for physical space, I'd say the three things that come to mind when I'm thinking about sleep space are light, sound, and temperature. And based on your living situation and where you are in the world, your ability to control some of these may vary. For myself, I found that the factor that is easiest to control and also can get the most off track when I don't have my sleep routine in place is light. I've experimented with trying to go to bed when the sun goes down, but for most of the year, that's too early in the day for my schedule. To do my best to replicate some of the effect of the sun going down, what I like to start to get back in the habit of is turning off overhead lights as it gets later in the day, switching to lamps as I'm starting to get ready for bed, and also starting to turn off some of those lights as it gets later and later in the day, just so that it gets darker and my brain is reminded by the physical space around me that it's almost time to get ready for bed. Not only that, but we've also talked a little bit about screen time before bed and trying to reduce that. That's another form of light that affects your physical space as you are getting ready for bed and going to bed. A couple of the tips that I would have are to make use of the well-being or night mode on your phone. I personally like to use the black and white mode for my phone after a certain time. I think right now I have it set to 8 p.m. After it switches into that mode, I find myself not picking up my phone as much, the content is less engaging, and again, that reduces the amount of light I'm exposed to as I'm getting ready for bed. I hope you can join me as we're getting into 2026 in a sleep reset routine, following those 3 steps of finding your baseline, your wind down window, and looking at your physical and mental space. It's so important, especially with the new year coming up, to get sleep back on track. I know for myself, I have some goals set for next year, and getting enough sleep is such an important way to get the rest and the energy that I need to achieve some of those other goals for 2026. So a question I want to leave you with is, what are some of the goals you have in mind for next year, and would better sleep help you with some of those goals? I'm also really interested to hear if you have very sleep or rest specific goals. I'll make sure to read the comments below so I can read any of those goals that you're willing to share. Stay tuned if you want to see more content like this. Rest up, and I'll see you in the next one.